My name is Linda Compton, and I live in a small city. The only developed part is near the station, while the area where I live is mostly rural, surrounded by farms. My family used to run a small smithy, where we made and repaired farm tools. Starting from my great-grandfather's time, we began making parts for farm machinery and eventually built a factory on a larger scale. Over time, our family became quite well known in the area. My father, David, is the president of Compton Machinery, and my mother, Cheryl, is the executive director. I have an older brother named Michael, who has always been very smart and the pride of my parents. In our countryside community, it's common for parents to have high expectations for their eldest son, and Michael lived up to those expectations by attending a prestigious high school. But while my parents showered my brother with attention, I was often ignored. In our traditional way of thinking, daughters are seen as people who will eventually leave the family. My brother, expected to take over the family business, was their focus. Meanwhile, I was left to the side, with no real expectations placed on me. "You're a girl. You can't inherit the family business," my father told me bluntly when I was just in middle school. "Once you finish high school, that's it." Even at that young age, I understood my place. I decided to focus on my studies, even though it was tough for a middle schooler to set such a goal. I had no choice but to keep moving forward. My focus on pushing ahead became my only driving force. My brother and I were so different that it was hard to believe we were related. At school, he was like the captain of a great ship, confident and respected by everyone. I, on the other hand, loved being active and free, running through the countryside like a deer or a goat. If there was one thing I was better at than my brother, it was sports. I was more athletic, but life didn't make things easy for me. Unlike my brother, who seemed naturally gifted, I had to work hard to study, and even then, my grades didn't improve much. My parents were quick to notice this difference. They often mocked me, saying things like, "You're no good. You're nothing like Michael. Don't you understand your limits?" Their words hurt deeply, but instead of giving up, I felt angry and frustrated. One day, when our school's midterm exam results came back, I was heartbroken. Despite all my hard work, my grades were still bad. I didn't want anyone to see my report card, but my parents insisted. When they looked at it, they laughed and said, "We should have expected this. There's no point in investing in you anymore. It's hard to believe you're Michael's sibling. Something must be wrong." As I sat there being scolded by my parents, I silently prayed for the moment to end. Just then, my brother stepped in. He wasn't great at expressing his feelings to our parents, but he was always there for me. "It might partly be my fault that our parents are so hard on you," he said. "But I'm here for you, always." His words felt like a warm hug, and I couldn't stop my tears. His support gave me strength, and I felt like I could face any challenge with him by my side. With his help, I slowly improved my studies. When I entered my second year of middle school, my brother passed the entrance exam for a prestigious university in the city and left home. His old room became empty, but his absence only made the comparison to him even harsher. My brother, with his natural talents, seemed to succeed effortlessly while I struggled in his shadow, still trying to find my own path. I enjoyed running far more than studying and joined the school's track team. Running had always been my passion, and I decided to chase my dream of becoming a long-distance runner. My goal was to get a recommendation from a prestigious school known for its relay team. While my brother was brilliant in academics, he wasn't good at sports. In this one area, I felt I was better than him. But even so, my parents didn't seem to care. They were only interested in his high grades, not the speed I could run. No matter how hard I worked, my efforts went unnoticed. My parents' attention and affection were always reserved for my brother, who continued to excel in his studies. When my brother turned 19, it was a big deal for my parents. They planned an extravagant celebration for his birthday. My mother even said, "Let's get him an expensive watch. If you can't afford to buy such a gift, don't even think about going to university." Her words stung, especially since I didn't have the money to give him anything fancy. As expected, when the day came, my family and relatives gathered at a well-known restaurant for a grand feast. Meanwhile, I was left at home as though I didn't belong there. My mother dismissed me, saying, "Michael deserves this because he's excellent. All you do is obsess over running. Being there would only make you feel worse." Her words hurt deeply. After they left, I sat alone at home and made myself instant noodles. As I poured hot water into the bowl, the rising steam reminded me of how empty and lonely I felt. Tears streamed down my face as sadness and frustration overwhelmed me. During that time, my brother returned home for summer break. He had graduated and started working at a top company, already carrying the responsibilities of an adult. He seemed more mature than ever. One day, he brought me a surprise. "This is an older model, but it's fast enough for browsing the internet. Give it a try. It might even help you with your studies," he said with a kind smile, handing me a laptop. Then he gave me a book and said, "Try using this too. I think you'll find it interesting." The book was a beginner's guide to programming. That moment marked the start of something new for me. My first step into the world of technology was a pivotal moment for me. Although I wasn't very good at math and science at first, I discovered that creating my own programs was surprisingly fun. I started using the laptop my brother gave me all the time. Every time one of my programs worked, I felt a deep sense of satisfaction. Slowly, I began to see a path I wanted to follow. It wasn't entirely clear yet, but the idea of a future in programming was starting to take shape in my mind. However, one day, my dream was suddenly crushed by my father. "Are you playing on the computer again instead of studying?" he asked sharply. "I'm programming, not playing," I replied, trying to stay calm. "Don't lie. You're just gaming on that thing," he accused me angrily. Frustrated by his misunderstanding, I snapped back, "People with old-fashioned ideas like you don't understand how to use computers." That comment only made him angrier. "What nonsense are you talking about? Don't speak to me like that, Linda," he shouted. Suddenly, he grabbed the laptop and, before I could stop him, threw it out the window. "Why would you do that?" I screamed, horrified. "You're still in high school and always playing games. Maybe now, with that computer gone, you'll finally focus on your studies," he said, laughing as if he had done me a favor. I ran outside to where the laptop had landed. It was completely destroyed, the screen shattered, the case cracked, and it wouldn't turn on anymore. My heart sank as I picked up the broken pieces. The laptop, a precious gift from my brother, and the tool that had sparked my interest in programming, was now just junk. Without any money to repair it, I felt like my dream was slipping away. Standing there with the broken laptop in my hands, I was filled with despair. My brother's thoughtful gift, which had given me hope for the future, was gone. I didn't know how I could continue. The next morning, still weighed down by sadness, I walked to school. That's when a friend noticed my mood and made a suggestion that sparked a tiny bit of hope. "Why don't you use the school's computers? The teacher might let you," they said. I decided to ask, and to my relief, the teacher agreed. From then on, the school's computer room became my safe haven. After class, I'd head there, where a reliable desktop computer was waiting for me. It wasn't fancy or portable like my laptop, but it was sturdy and dependable. That computer became my foundation, giving me a way to keep learning and holding on to the dream I had almost lost. I started spending more and more time in the school computer room. On weekends, one of my teachers, who noticed how passionate I was, offered extra help. Programming became my focus throughout high school, and I worked hard to improve my skills little by little. During the summer of my sophomore year, my brother suggested I join a summer course in Chicago. I saved up for the travel expenses by working part-time jobs. I stayed in the dormitory of the company where my brother worked, dedicating my days to the course and spending my evenings learning from my brother and his unique friend, Tony. "Tony's a bit quirky, but he's not a bad guy," my brother said with a grin. "He's just not used to being around girls since he went to an all-boys school. So don't tease him too much." Tony, pretending to look offended, replied, "What are you talking about? I've had plenty of interactions with girls." "Oh, really? When was that?" my brother teased. During the folk dance in elementary school," Tony said, his face turning red. We couldn't help but burst into laughter at this innocent and funny moment. Tony's honesty and quirks added a unique charm to that summer. That summer became a turning point for me. With the encouragement of my brother and Tony's guidance, my love for programming grew even stronger. By the end of the summer, I felt like I had taken a big step into the world of programming, and it completely captivated me. Tony was different from my brother. He was polite, refined, and carried himself like someone from a well-mannered family. Although he was a bit eccentric, there was no malice in him, and I found his personality oddly endearing. As I entered the summer of my final year in high school, something unexpected happened. My brother, who had apologized earlier for the destruction of my laptop, returned home during the break with a surprise. He handed me a used laptop and said with a mischievous smile, "This is from Tony. He's pretty well off, so I asked him if he had any computers lying around, and he gave me this one. He wanted you to have it as a gift." "Why would he do that?" I asked, my face turning red. "I don't know," my brother teased. "Maybe he likes you." "Stop. Stop saying nonsense." I protested, but my flustered reaction only made my brother laugh harder as he playfully tapped me on the head. That laptop became my lifeline. It wasn't just a computer. It was a symbol of the support I'd received from my brother and Tony, and it pushed me to work even harder toward my dreams. My brother gave me plenty of advice, and my programming skills improved a lot. One day, he said, "I never thought you'd get so into programming." "Yeah, it's really interesting," I replied. "Sometimes things don't work because of a small mistake in the calculations, but solving a problem is so exciting." Programming wasn't just a fun activity for me. It had become my passion. Seeing my own programs come to life was a joy that couldn't be described in words. Driven by this passion, I made a big decision. I decided to leave home, skip university, and take a job in the city at a tech company with a new computer in hand. I felt ready to move forward and keep improving my programming skills. My journey had only just begun. One cold winter day, as I was preparing for my new life, my parents called me unexpectedly. Normally, their conversations weren't pleasant, so I wasn't hopeful, but this time, it was different. "Let's go on a family trip," my father suggested. Family trips were a distant memory from my childhood, so I was surprised. My uncle had won a hotel voucher in a lottery, and we decided to use it. I felt a bit excited, especially since my brother would be joining us. On the day of the trip, we drove to a hotel in a snowy area, with my father at the wheel. My parents seemed unusually cheerful during the drive, chatting mostly about my brother's job and my father's struggles with his factory. As usual, I was left out of the conversation. When we arrived, the hotel was much fancier than I had expected. We relaxed by the pool and enjoyed delicious meals together. But something about my parents' sudden kindness felt off. It didn't seem genuine. Late that night, I woke up to use the bathroom. On my way back, I overheard my parents talking in hushed voices from their room. "We can't keep spending money on her anymore," my mother said. "If we leave her behind, she'll understand," my father replied. "Yes, it's time for a big house cleaning," she agreed. I froze in place, my heart pounding. They were planning to abandon me. I felt like I was meant to be left behind, and accepting it seemed like the only choice I had. With a heavy heart, I prepared to leave home. The drive back was quiet, with hardly any conversation. Maybe everyone was just tired. I was supposed to be dropped off at the station and then head straight to the dormitory at my new job. Suddenly, my father spoke up. "I feel like having a coffee. Is there a vending machine nearby?" "There's a parking area up ahead. We can get coffee there," my brother answered. My father smiled, seeming unusually cheerful. "All right, let's stop there for a break," he said. Soon, we reached the parking area, and my father turned to me. "Linda, go buy us some coffee." As expected, I got out of the car and walked to the vending machines. I chose hot coffee for my father and brother, tea for my mother, and grabbed a milk tea for myself. But as I turned to head back, I saw something that stopped me in my tracks: my father unloading my suitcase from the car. "Well, this is goodbye," he said casually. "Driving you all the way to the station takes too much time and fuel." I stood there in shock. "Wait, isn't the station still far from here?" "You can figure it out. Run or walk." You were on the track team, weren't you? You should have the energy, he said coldly. Are you serious? I asked, my voice trembling. It's time you managed on your own. All right, cleaning complete, he added, his words cutting deep. You really were just a piece of trash getting in the way. I looked at my brother, hoping for support, but he said nothing. Instead, he gently placed my cat on top of my suitcase. Standing in the snowy parking lot, I watched as the car drove away, disappearing into the distance. Tears blurred my vision, but somewhere in my heart, I realized this was the start of something new. My old life was over, but maybe, just maybe, this was the first step toward a fresh chapter. 15 years later, I returned to my hometown. A lot had changed. I was now thriving as a project leader at a successful company. The reason for my visit was work-related. There was a project at the local factory. Still, returning to this place stirred up a mix of excitement and old, painful memories. As the familiar factory came into view, I heard a voice that made my heart skip a beat. Linda. I turned to see my brother stepping out of a car, smiling and waving as he walked toward me. I was worried you might get lost, my brother said. As we approached the factory, the scenery had changed a lot. No worries, I replied. The GPS worked perfectly. Without missing a beat, he started talking about work. The client has high expectations, so we need to be ready. I smirked playfully. Let's see how long you can keep that energy. Don't underestimate me, he shot back. I've toughened up a lot in the city. You've really grown stronger, he said, clearly impressed. It's because I've been pushing myself, I replied. You naturally get stronger when you work hard. This reunion wasn't just by chance. It was all because of this project. My brother, with his experience in a large corporation, had started his own company, using his expertise in mechanical engineering to create innovative products. His work had begun to catch attention in the market, offering hope to struggling businesses. Now, our hometown factory was in trouble, facing a serious financial crisis. That's why my brother had reached out to me, proposing a new project to help turn things around. Let's get going, he said, and I nodded, gathering my thoughts as we headed toward the factory. As we opened the doors, a cold draft greeted us, carrying the faint scent of the past. It brought back a wave of bittersweet memories. This place wasn't just a factory, it was where I had grown up. The air felt like a quiet awakening, stirring emotions I hadn't felt in years. Then, as if on cue, the curtain of a long-forgotten play lifted. In front of us stood my parents, motionless, their expressions unreadable. Thank you for coming all this way, my mother finally said, her voice low, her eyes looking down in desperation. We heard you might be able to help our nearly bankrupt factory, and we're deeply grateful. My father added, still avoiding eye contact. We truly appreciate it. There's no need to be so formal, my brother said, his tone calm but firm. No, my mother insisted. We must show our sincerity to you, our important guests from Tony Industries, all the way from Chicago. As they continued speaking, I decided to steer the conversation. Let's focus on business matters, I said, keeping my tone professional. At the sound of my voice, they froze. Their bodies stiffened slightly, and they slowly raised their heads to look at me. That voice that's familiar, they murmured, their faces a mix of confusion and disbelief. Finally, recognition dawned. You know it can't be. Linda? Is it really you? I stood there, watching their shocked expressions, and couldn't help but smile slightly. Yes, it was me, Linda. I couldn't help but laugh as they finally realized who I was. Yes, it's me, Linda, I said, the one you left behind in the snowy mountains. They looked stunned. How are you here? We were told someone from Tony Industries would be coming. Well, I'm the one they sent, I explained. I'm a project leader at Tony Industries. Tony's father is the president. After you abandoned me, Tony, who is a friend of Michael, stepped in to help me. My brother had seen this coming and made arrangements to protect me. I paused, looking directly at them. It wasn't easy, but I've built a life for myself. I've established a career, and I'm married now. My husband is a department head at Tony Industries. The president personally assigned me to lead this factory's rejuvenation project. Do you understand now? My parents stood frozen and I continued. At the time, my brother was furious with what you planned to do. Before that trip, he talked to Tony and prepared for the worst. On the day it happened, my brother gave me a note that read, "Our parents intend to leave you behind. If anything happens, call this number." As expected, when it happened, I called the number. Tony answered right away. I paused, the memories still vivid in my mind. Tony later admitted, a little embarrassed, that he'd taken paid leave in advance just in case I needed help. He came to pick me up immediately. When he arrived, I told him how heartbreaking it was to be abandoned like that. Tears rolled down my cheeks as I spoke. Tony didn't say much. He just quietly loaded my luggage into his car and drove me away from that snowy place. I smiled softly. After that, I started working at a company in Chicago, which turned out to be a subsidiary of the company run by Tony's father. With the support of both Tony and my brother, I worked hard and studied at the same time. A year later, I enrolled in a night university, balancing work and education. After graduating, I transferred to the main company, where I could use my specialized knowledge. I took on a role in construction management, and over time I built my career. Looking back, I added, as Tony got promoted, I began working closely with him while leading a project under his direction. My respect for him gradually turned into love. Eventually, he proposed, and we got married. I stood there, facing my parents, their shocked faces unable to hide their guilt. My journey had come full circle, and now I was the one offering them a lifeline. I kept working and got involved in a project focused on bringing production back to local factories. Due to the strong currency and rising labor costs overseas, manufacturing abroad was becoming less profitable. Companies started looking for cost-effective and efficient options, leading to a renewed interest in domestic production. While searching for a new factory location to match these trends, I received unexpected news from my brother. Our family's factory was in serious financial trouble. The factory, which used to supply machine parts to large companies, had been lowering its prices to compete, but this strategy had pushed it into a financial corner. Taking this situation seriously, my brother and I decided to visit the factory together. When we arrived, my parents' attitude changed completely. Seeing me as a representative of Tony Industries, they suddenly became confident. "Now that Linda is here, we have nothing to worry about," my father said. "It's only natural for a daughter to help her family in tough times." I looked at them calmly and said, "I think you might be misunderstanding something. I don't see you as my parents anymore. My relationship with this factory will only be business-related." Their expressions changed, and my mother snapped, "How can you say such a thing? How can you be so heartless? I didn't raise you to be this way." Although they were angry, I remained composed. "The current state of this factory is the result of your poor management. Because of this, we will be replacing the entire management team with staff from headquarters. In other words, your time here is over." My father's face turned red with frustration. "You can't do that. The factory can be sold to pay off some of the debts. I can still manage it after that, right?" I shook my head firmly. "I cannot trust this factory's future to you. What do you plan to do about the remaining debts? This rescue effort is only happening because of Michael's hard work. As for your lives going forward, that's your challenge to face. Good luck." My brother and I turned and walked away, leaving our parents sitting on the floor, powerless. "Well, that's finally settled," my brother said. "It's not really the end," I replied. "It's just the beginning. This place will become a domestic production hub soon. With the production management system you developed and the new machine tools I've designed," my brother added, "we can aim to be the best in the country, right?" "Not just the best in the country," I said, smiling. "We're aiming to be the best in the world." Sharing a laugh, we both felt hopeful about the future. As expected, our parents sold the factory, but the money wasn't enough to cover all their debts. Even so, we were ready to rebuild from the ground up, fueled by a shared vision of success. I heard my parents are now working in a freezing place. They've asked us for money several times, but we've ignored them completely. Still, I couldn't just do nothing, so I decided to send them some disposable hand warmers I had collected during my college years. It was a small, ironic way of giving back, considering they once left me out in the cold. Meanwhile, the factory we purchased has been completely transformed after renovations. It's now thriving and full of new energy. The factory has centralized everything from manufacturing to inventory management and shipping. It has created jobs for the local community and gained significant appreciation. Together with my husband, I've been working on new projects to expand our division even further. In the future, we plan to focus on helping American companies expand into overseas markets and building strong business partnerships. Our lives are busy, but we always make time to take a break a few times a year at that distant hotel. Every year, when the snow starts to fall, I think about that parking area and feel a tug in my heart. This year, I found myself visiting the spot again. "What are you thinking about?" my husband asked gently. "Reflecting on the past again." "Yes," I replied, smiling softly. "This place holds so many unforgettable memories." "Me too," he said, smiling back. "It all started here." I laughed. "I remember that day. Even though it was the middle of winter, your face was as red as a boiled octopus." "You're one to talk," he teased. "Your face was so red. You looked like a little kid." We looked at each other and burst out laughing. "Thank you." "I love you," I said, feeling a warmth in my heart. "No, thank you," he replied with a smile. Life, I thought, is like a book made up of many stories. Moments like these form the chapters of our story as a couple, and this chapter, it's one of the most beautiful.